I see a lot of excitement going on in the chat section already, and I think that is obviously tells you a little bit about how good this session is going to be. So let us jump into it. So Zainab, thank you for giving us an opportunity to talk to you today. This is, by the way, the second session of Equity Matters. In the last session, we went through Sapiens strategies. So we had Vishaka Datta, who's the director of Sapient, DNI initiative at Sapient, and she took us through the various initiatives taken up by them. Today, we're going to get into what KPMG has done. Obviously, KPMG has also won a lot of awards. So this session is going to be one inspiring, second quite informational. Jumping right into it, Zainab, if you can begin the session by sharing your journey with us, that would be beautiful.
Thank you, Regina. One is that very happy to speak to all of you. I mean, you're a bunch of enthusiasts people, and that would actually go on to change the face of how we look and work and interact in society. So my name is Zainab Patel, and currently I am the Director for Inclusion and Diversity at KPMG in India, and I lead a team of 25,000 strong people across KPMG in India in their inclusion and diversity journey. Prior to this, I served with the United Nations for about 11 years. 7 of which were in India, serving as a national role, and 4 of which were in the region, in the Asia Pacific region, serving South and Southeast Asia and parts of the Pacific. I was a human rights analyst. A core of my function was to look at human rights treaty bodies and how there is an interplay of gender, ability, migrants, and ethnicity, along with orientation in the various human rights violations that happen. My journey started a long time back in Mumbai. So I was born in Mumbai, born and brought up in Mumbai to a set of Catholic parents, and I belong to a Roman Catholic family. Very conservative childhood in the sense that I had a very protective childhood. My parents, I have 2 elder siblings, both of them who are women who are 10 and 8 years elder to me. So from that perspective, only kind of male heir in the family. I was born a male child 40 years ago, and although my family was not a misogynist in the sense that it's not that they favored daughters over sons or sons over daughters, they did feel happy that after 10 years they were blessed with a child which they thought would take forward the family name. Unfortunately, it was not meant to be. That's in that sense. I was put in Catholic Education Institute, and in that Catholic Education Institute, I realized that there was a conflict between my inner self, my outer self, the values given to us as a Catholic uh, person, what my family value system was, and ultimately what the society expected me to be as a woman or as a man. And the biggest unfortunate situation was that none of them ever sat on a table together because each one of us was in a different tangent. The person in me was screaming that she was a woman. My siblings wanted me to be a younger brother. My parents wanted me to be their doting son. The neighbors wanted me to be a friend, a sympathizer, but a male sympathizer. And ultimately, the society wanted to groom me as a man. And all through my childhood, which was a very sickly childhood because I was born as a premature baby, my parents tried to give me the best of education and also tried to protect me from too many outdoor activities as I would tend to fall sick more often. I don't know whether it worked in my favor or no, but I actually mastered the art of playing badminton and played up to the inter-district level. Um, as I grew up, that was in right up from my 6th standard onwards, I realized this very strong sense of being a woman from inside. And whenever I would look at myself in the mirror or look at what people's reaction about me was, I said, why are they thinking of me as a man? And why am I the woman that I always want to be? And this only got stronger because as children, and it was in an all boys school, so everyone tried to behave hyper masculine as they were growing up with the interplay of hormones in your body. Everyone tries to create a very dominant environment. And that's when all the sexual harassment and the physical harassment, verbal harassment would start. When you were trying to walk back from school, cat calls and all that stuff. It bothered me to such a strong extent that I started self-harming from school. And one particular incident landed me in a hospital. It made me lose control of my peripheral nerves for 2 years. I had to undergo physiotherapy. I passed out 2 batches later compared to all of my other friends and relatives. And I was seen as a loser. Loser because people came to know that they identified me as a homosexual before. So they thought that this is just homosexual tendencies, and that's why the person is undergoing depression or lost 2 years of education. When I went to college, that's when I actually realized that there are many other people like me around me in society, and it is worth to try to be the person. And at that point of time, I actually made a promise to myself that I will never let anyone ever decide what I should be. Growing up, I realized that nobody in college wanted to work with me once I came out on television. They would stop doing project team works with me, and I ultimately dropped out of college. Um, it took me a lot of effort to rejoin college and complete education, but that only happened because a Hijra Guru took me along with her to the principal, and she said that I want one of my community members to complete her education. And the principal said that I can't guarantee that people will work with your person with us, but at least he can write the exams in my room. And I took up that offer, completed my graduation. I also realized that my parents didn't wanted me to become a trans person. They were okay with an effeminate young person, but they were not okay with a transgender person. They thought that was the most shameful thing to do, and one should not tinker with God's creation. I had to make the choice of leaving my house and joining the transgender community, but that was a lesson. The lesson to leave the comfort of your own bed, the warmth of your home food, uh, the flavor of your mom's cooking, to be able to go and join, sleep on the mat in a transgender person's house, beg for survival, and try and become the person that you wanted to. And as they say that all these hard situations in your life actually make you something different. I I took that as a challenge. So every lived experience of mine actually made me more and more stronger. To be laughed at, to be taunted, to be abused all through your life just for who you are, because the society never considered you to be an equal, to rising up like a phoenix between them to actually prove that yes, I am good as you in most of the stuff, and even perhaps better than my other cisgendered counterparts in so many things that trans people are being able to bring to the lift. So I then moved to Delhi. I got a job in Mumbai, tried to do work in a a big corporate NGO. Actually, once recruited me and said that if we don't give people like them jobs, who will? And I took that as a personal insult because I thought I left that organization in 3 months. And I took that as a personal challenge that what does this person mean that people like us? Do people like us not have two pair of legs, two pair of hands, a brain to think, a vision to act out? And I said that I will pursue this. I joined the Hijra community. It doesn't make a difference to me. Struggled for 3 years. And then someone who told me that, you have to complete your education. You have to get a post-graduation degree. Otherwise, you will always be like on the periphery. Yes, you're good to have, but not so good. And that's when I completed my post graduation. I did my MBA, and that's the reason why I call myself an accidental MBA. I then got a chance to work with the United Nations on a small LGBT project. And while working with them for 4 months, they realized that I had immense potential, and they, kind of took me in as full-time staff. From there, my journey of transformation actually began when you were interacting with bureaucrats, you were interacting with NGOs, with human rights professionals, with gender activists, with Dalit right activists, and so many other issues. And you were meeting with ministers, some of them who looked at you and outrightly dismissed you on your face. Some of them were curious, some of them were inquisitive, and most of them were open to the idea of me working. If I had to go back to my family, I had to cut my hair. So my mother was suffering from terminal cancer. And 5 times in my life, they made me cut my hair just to see my mother, because they didn't wanted my mother to see me with long hair or wearing women's clothes. Finally, she passed away in 2013 after a long battle with cancer. And then I officially started my social transitioning as a woman. That has been the few terrible moments of my life where I had to kind of judge between what is right and what should be done in a right way. And often what should be done in the right way preceded what is actually right. Coming from that, I got an opportunity to work in Bangkok as a regional human rights analyst. That kind of made me a very strong woman, a very opinionated woman, a very articulate woman, and a very confident woman. You won't believe the person who's speaking to you today, one at one point of life used to stutter, couldn't ask for addresses, was extremely non-confident person when it comes to navigating. I remember in 2009 when I came to Delhi, and the GPS maps on our phone were not updated then. They were, and you had to have really good net connection. I was once stuck in an area for 40 minutes trying to find that location on my own because I just didn't have the courage to ask people address. And see myself today. I mean, if I could consider myself as a case study, I think I would sum it up in three words that one is that I survived. I survived patriarchy, I survived misogyny, I survived transphobia, I survived self-harm. I became resilient. In either situation when life throws you lemons, you either make lemonade out of it or you come out with a sour tongue or brain freeze. I decided to make lemonade and also sell it to people. So used my life story as a story of resilience because um, for me being human is not about getting opportunities. It is what we do with those opportunities for yourself and for others. So unwantingly, I became a role model for people. Fought my case in the Supreme Court, which ultimately became a national case, and managed to secure rights for millions of people in India who are still in the shadows of what the society wants them to do. And the third part is that when I was in Bangkok, I had the opportunity um, to meet a lovely Indian person who I got married to in South Africa. So that's how the Patel in my name comes from. It might sound like a funny thing. It sounds like Kareena Kapoor says in Three Idiots, like Funsuk Wangadu. For me, Patel was that equivalent of Funsuk Wangadu. In fact, one day my sister asked me, why not? So I have a Portuguese surname, it's called Narona. And said, why Narona? Why not Narona and why Patel? I said, because P comes after N. That's why I chose Patel, not Narona. And in 2018, I finished a 4-year stint with the regional office and didn't take a made a very informed decision. I didn't want to go elsewhere in the world. I wanted to come back to India, and that's when I came back to India and landed up with this job with KPMG, and proudly in front of you sharing my story. That's it. That's about it. Short, crisp, and to the point.
Thank you for sharing your entire journey. By the way, Zainab was one of the versus the Union India case on transgender rights. That's what she was talking about. So, thanks to your efforts, Zainab, the Supreme Court's judgment paved a new way for transgenders in India. So, can you tell us any radical change which we can bring about in policies in the corporate space?
Let me tell you something, Rachel. The judgment that we fought was not to create a culture or an inclusive culture. It was to basically gain the same kind of rights as every other Indian person did. As an Indian or as a citizen of any country versus being an alien, I mean, when you say being an alien, not as in someone who comes in from Mars, but someone who doesn't have the same set of citizenship rights. That means the right to vote and the right to run for elections. So imagine if you're in a country where you're neither a citizen nor an alien. You are surviving in the country by default. You bear some marks of citizenship, but you cannot run for elections, you cannot vote. And it took actually a court case for us in early 2000 to actually determine whether transgender people actually had the right to vote or not. And imagine our journey started at that. We were tired. Frankly speaking, some bureaucrat came and put eunuchs in the passports, so the male, female, and eunuchs. Now, eunuchs is a biblical term. It has nothing to do with contemporary India or medieval India. No one even understood the term unless it was for the 200 years that the British were in India for. They were the ones who used that term. The second thing is that no one counted us in the census until 2010. So when you are not counted, how can you be visible? How can a country say that we want to plan something for trans people and if you're not being out? And that's where we kind of a group of three trans people, Gauri, Lakshmi, and I, decided that enough is enough. I'm never going to be the vote bank for anyone. I'm never going to be an election priority for any government or any elected party. So why not be our own savior? And then, like Mariah Carey says, there's a hero inside you. So we had to find the hero inside us, make the hero wake up, go to the Supreme Court, file a petition, ensure all of our deliberations in court actually fructify. So the love letters that our hero wrote to the Supreme Court actually won. And finally, on 14th of April, 6 years ago in 2014, we actually got the NASA judgment. And what it did was fundamentally telling people that all of us, as male and female, we often talk about non-discrimination, about so everything being equal in the eyes of the law. So we just said that one is that discrimination on the grounds of sex is not acceptable, and then sex includes sexual orientation and gender identity. So being male, female, or trans is the same thing, and you have the choice to be what you want. The choice to be what you want cannot be determined if you decide to take tablets or hormones, if you decide to go under a surgeon's knife, or whether you just plainly decide one day in the morning that yes, Zainab Patel is not going to be a male, Zainab Patel is going to be a woman or a transgender, uh, and she deserves to be recognized. And then we also asked for certain welfare measures and reservations because this is one community in 73 years of India's independence not come to the forefront. We have one Zainab Patel who's a director in a corporate India, but look at the 487,000 people who are still transgender people, who are still struggling on the street, in brothels, on the roads, begging, trying to become something, trying to find their name, and to try to live with dignity. So for me, again, it was about proving a point that trans people also contribute to society and not necessarily be asked the question, "Aap kuch karte kyun nahi?"
So I think your courage and your strong will ensured that you
Just
paved
excuse my
this new
leaky
way.
nose.
So I
I have a
congratulate
terrible
you for
allergy
that.
today.
That's perfectly all right. The weather is so, what can we do? Uh, but coming back to the question which I wanted to ask, let me reframe it a bit. If you can help us understand, if you're looking at workplaces in particular, being an analyst yourself, that was your key role in UNDP, right?
Yeah.
Also being the director of diversity and inclusion, I'm sure you can cite a gap which needs to be filled right now. Can you help us understand the policies or the change which is required in the workplaces to ensure that this kind of discrimination does not creep in or make anybody uncomfortable in the workplace?
So fortunately for me, I am in the newly constituted National Council for Transgender as a member, and supposed to help the government help design policies and legislative frameworks for trans inclusion. So I think as a transgender person, I'll talk to you as a lay person, not as an analyst over here. So if I were to be a trans person who was yet to transition at the workplace, I'm assuming that there are people who want to transition and there are people who will perhaps come to you in a transition manner. So these are largely the two spectrums that you would find. As someone who's already transitioned, most of the gender markers might you may have documents as a woman or as a male or as a trans. It's actually the people who are yet to begin their transitioning journey who have documents in the sex that they do not identify with. So the first thing that any organization should do is try to protect all of its employees, incoming as well as those who are already on their payroll, through an anti-discrimination policy that prohibits discrimination, name calling, and other kind of offenses, which include grounds of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. This is the basic that people to do, and that is the basic requirement of any organization because you want an organization to be non-discriminatory. The second thing that you may want to do is looking at your sexual harassment at the workplace policies to see if the code of conduct inquiries can actually take in complaints on sexual harassment from non-female born sexual minorities. So whether it is a person who's male born, it is a person who could probably be intersex, it could actually be a transitioning person or what, so on and so forth. The third thing is that does your job descriptions, does your equal opportunities policies actually call out people from lesser marginalized groups to actually come ahead and apply for work and be selected if all merits remain equal? That would be the basic thing to do. On a secondary level, when you are able to cross that level, I would say that your recruitment matrix need to underscore a fact that, like for example, a job of an analyst in any organization would involve you at least being a BCom with X years of experience, 2 years or 3 years of experience, whatever. And then if you have two males, one trans person and a woman coming in for the interview, I'm assuming the education and work qualification all remain the same to get entry into the pool of candidates. And if they are in the final three, would you give more points to a trans person or to a woman coming in so that they get competitive edge? That it doesn't make sense to only say that all women are encouraged to apply, or transgender people are encouraged to apply, or persons with disability. What is the enabling provision of that employment equal opportunities policy? The third thing is insurance, life insurance. If you are into a live-in relationship or a domestic partnership with anyone, you should be able to extend it to the person irrespective of the sex of the person. I'm not saying gender, I'm saying sex of the person. Uh, so whether it's male, female, or trans, whatever you want to kind of put it, and not gender, because it doesn't matter if the person is in a live-in relationship or domestic partnership, you should. The third thing is that medical benefits. A lot of people do a brouhaha about, can we really afford gender transitioning services? Can we pay for surgery? Let me tell you, my organization pays a very big amount of money in insurance premium every year. And for the last few years, when gender transitioning surgeries were being deliberated, and they said that, "Oh, but we can't afford to pay this. What if it changes the premium and stuff like that?" And suddenly I picked up the call one day and I spoke to the insurance focal point and I said that for about 6 lakh rupees, you're trying to make it sound like you would have to pay a crore in premium. And she said, Zainab, what will it intake? I said, it will just intake you arm twisting the insurance person and said that even if there are 5 to 10 people who wish to transition at any given point of time, we will not have more than 5 people transitioning, at least for the next 3 years or so. But even if they want to, easily an amount of 25 lakhs can be absorbed as cost for insurance premium that we pay close to 25 crores. That can easily be done. It will get done. And I just got a simple email notification saying that from 1st of April, gender affirming care is part of our medical insurance. We just had to back up the leave and other transitioning guidelines to it. The rest, the bigger chunk of the stuff was about the cost of the surgery, which is now covered. The third thing, the last thing which I believe is that whenever you have a trans person or a person with disability come in, you might want to set in an employment checklist and make sure that your back-end processes and background verification do not do more harm to the person and actually want to save the reputation. Because when you do background checks, if today someone says that I'm going to go and search for Ernest Narona at this house, so who's Ernest Narona? My neighbors might actually say that we don't know this person at all. Or who is this person? Whether if the person is transitioning but not open at the home, you might actually go and ask for Zainab Patel where Ernest Narona is living. So that has to be done with uttermost sensitivity to the fact. Your onboarding checklist should actually include a session with the performance manager and with the team to sensitize them to the issue about what could be the emerging needs when you have a person who comes in from a marginalized community background. The person might not say that I need X, Y, Z, but as part of the enabling environment that you need to do, you have to. And on the journey, when you bring in a sensitive buddy to the person, because when you have a sensitive buddy bringing in, easing the person into the organization, try and extend the time. So instead of 15 days, try and make it a month, so that the buddy is able to be to them to some of the most unsettling times that you have. And in your periodic check-in, do make sure that if the person requires help, whether mentoring or coaching can be made available. These, I think, are some of the basic fundamental blocks which all of us work on, but it requires a little bit of innovative thinking and a little bit of moving beyond the box.
So at this point, I would like to encourage as many participants to ask questions. So Zainab went through some substantial information with us. One, she talked about trans insurance and insurance cover in general. She also talked about talent attraction, retention, for people from diversity background. So if you have any question, if you want us to deep dive, feel free to ask us and we'll take your questions towards the end of the session. Going forward, Zainab, I know that you're also involved in another initiative in KPMG. If you can quickly help us understand what that initiative is and tell us the basic challenge which you faced. I'm talking about Allies for Inclusion, where it's a complete allyship initiative taken up by KPMG.
So 2 years ago, KPMG launched a program on allyship for LGBT people. It was called Ally of Inclusion. Now, this ally is beyond being a volunteer, beyond being someone who gives time to the initiative. It is someone who actively champions for the cause of LGBT inclusion in their teams, in the shop floor, in the businesses, and if you're in the leadership position, you champion it there. We then had a rethink on this. So we basically saw our office get flooded with rainbow flags and flags in the canteen and lanyards and stuff. And I said we need to move beyond this visual merchandising to actually stuff on the ground. So that's when we launched Ally for Inclusion 2.0, which is an ally for of inclusion, but it is encompassing of the work that we do for PWD, for gender, for multiculturalism, and for LGBTIQ. So we have a multi-shaded logo. So depending on which specific ally while you become an ally overall, you might actually want to dedicate your time to be an ally for, say, persons with disability. So you have a teal colored logo for that. If you want to be an ally on gender, you have a purple colored logo for that. So if you want to be an ally for LGBT inclusion, you have a rainbow hued logo for that, and so on and so forth. So what we did is actually ran a campaign for 2 months. We had last year a 1 month long campaign after the first anniversary of the Supreme Court judgment. Basically 13 locations, more than 16 sessions, 10 panel discussion, 2 leadership series on LGBTIQ inclusion specifically. I was fortunate enough to be brought into KPMG at that same juncture to actually send out a message saying that we actually believe in inclusion, and here we're going to be setting the story right by having a transgender woman lead our inclusion and diversity portfolio. Post that, we did our rebranding around the Ally of Inclusion, sent out mailers to every staff, got people to sign up in every session, have an informal group of volunteers first brainstorming and coming up with the roadmap. So now totally we have about 800 plus different LGBTIQ ally volunteers, community members and allies who've come together under this program to promote LGBTIQ inclusion at the workplace. So they meet every fortnight, they decide on events, they decide on external engagement, they decide on internal pride branding, and they are also part of KPMG's Global Pride Network. So I chair the India chapter, but there is a community co-chair as well. And now we'll be coming up with a reverse mentoring program for LGBTIQ millennials to kind of reverse mentor some of our senior leadership on LGBTIQ issues.
That's a very innovative plan, and I think it's going to be quite engaging. So that's good. Let's take a couple of questions in the middle, and then we can jump off to the rest of the questions for the evening. So we have an individual who wants to ask, how is KPMG working towards reaching out to trans professionals and upskilling them, especially for niche roles like cyber risk?
Okay, so let me tell you this, that we did not do anything until 2020 on creating niche roles, or for example even reaching out to people from the trans community. But now as we move ahead, we had two specific hiring drives. We did not get any trans candidate who applied for the hiring drives though, but we did kind of look at specific role models who could kind of come and address our staff in terms of creating specific niches. Even that did not seem to work. So what we are doing now, along with Neelam Jain in Periphery, is trying to design a skill and hire kind of program for specifically for trans people, and to open up a couple of positions in the CSR team also for our trans people to come in and join. So that is an ambitious plan that we hope to put into practice from 2020 to 22. We have an ambition that by end of 2022, we will have at least 25 trans people working with us in the organization. This is not taking into account how many people identify as LGBTIQ in the current workforce, but 25 new hires, and these are KPMG hires. These are not going to be third-party hires, who will be part of our program in management as well as in operations supportive role. That is what my vision is, to have at least 25 trans people in very prominent business roles as we move ahead. From the LGBT hiring perspective, we did manage to get a few candidates. I think we hired about 11 candidates between last year and now for various roles. Only 3 out of them are visible and want to talk about their journey. The rest, we are sensitive and accepting of their need to maintain privacy around their sexual orientation and gender identity issues, and we are working on that topic.
All right, thank you for that answer, Zainab. Also, I would like to thank all the participants for being such an interactive audience. This is what makes our sessions successful. Also, if I can quickly encourage everybody to follow Inclusify on our various social media handles, because we're going to have more sessions related to D&I. We're going to come up with interesting topics. We're going to bring forward more D&I leaders. In fact, if you would like us to cover any particular topic, feel free to reach out to us through our email ID, hello@inclusify.io, and we'll be happy to engage with you. So there are questions which are pouring in, and there are appreciations enough for you today. So I'm going to read out one of them. So there is an individual who wants to say, Zainab, thanks for sharing your story. It helped me personally. How do we sensitize employees? Because most of the time people do not understand what LGBTQI means. So that's the first part of the question. Or there are a lot of misconceptions or biases given by your parents' environment when you grow up. So I think this person may be in a little bit of a pickle and wants to pick your brain and get a little bit of advice.
Okay, been there in the similar situation for the longest part of my life. It was the most toughest decision to explain someone. But I'll tell you in KPMG how we did it. So the first thing was, your leadership has to buy this in. And when you talk about allyship, allyship has 2 L's in it, and both of these L's kind of signify leaders. So the first thing is that your boss needs to be your ally. You can have a bottoms up approach once you have general area of sensitization, and you need to kind of create a groundswell, but the leadership commitment is absolutely important as you move ahead. In my case, we had a very supportive CEO and a very active evangelist as a CHRO. He drove inclusion. He was very keen. I'm sure in our organization we had as many as a fair share of homophobic and transphobic partner directors as well. But I think he was convinced of the idea of inclusion, and he said that if you want to be different than the big four, you have to kind of make this chance and take this risk and to walk. And I think the idea is to walk the talk. So no longer it's about, oh, let us do good for these pitiable homosexual men and women and let them bring it to the forefront. Sorry, that thing doesn't work anymore. There are these extremely creative young men and women, and so what if they come from different orientation, their lived realities will actually help us shape our business acumen better. Let's get them on board. And just yesterday, we had a call within the organization and said that, are we now ready to go ahead and talk about the wonderful place that we are in? So it still took 1 year for them to talk about putting internal stuff into place before we go hammer and tongs out to talk about it. So one is get your leadership to talk about it, get the firm backing of your CHRO to do that, and at least some of your business heads and top of the HR leads to kind of push this. In the initial years, all of this pushing which actually help create the groundswell later on. If in the initial time this doesn't work out, it's not going to make sense. See, biasness are always there, especially when it comes to the ground of sex, because this is something that we are unfortunately blessed with as Indians. Or for most of the people where, so misogyny or kind of phobia around sex and sexuality happens. So that is something that we need to do. I don't, I mean, whenever I have taken sessions, I never am apologetic about LGBTIQ issues. In fact, sometimes I'll tell you one small habit. When we use about LGBTIQ, I mean, we say it so fast that someone might not even understand what LGBTIQ is at this pace. But I try to make people call out each alphabet, LGBT, lesbian, bisexual, so that people sit up and listen. I think that also signals a change in your vocabulary, because we get so caught up and hide behind certain acronyms where it doesn't spell out a role in being an ally or a leader.
Uh, there's also another interesting thing which I would like to share. When I was preparing for this session, I went through KPMG's website and I saw that KPMG India in particular has won a lot of awards for being inclusive. So like, for example, KPMG has been ranked among the top companies to work in India for 4 years in a row by LinkedIn. So that's a big achievement. That's one of the awards I'm talking about. There are 3-4 more. Can you help us understand the steps which KPMG takes, which keeps them on top?
Okay, so as I said that we have very proactive leadership and evangelical CHRO who actually believes that putting policies and money where the mouth is. So whatever he shoots out in public domain is thoroughly backed by a policy, or it not only saying that, intent is like wise words in an old book. Nobody reads an old book anymore unless you have a Kindle version of it or an audiobook version of it. So I think what KPMG was trying to do was also try to make a lot of business sense for them, because if they are participating in big global tenders, if they were going to respond to an RFP, there is a lot of importance now given on your inclusion and diversity score. What is the what is your diversity score look like? What is your work around with underrepresented populations? How do you do work on the LGBT issues? So I think the biggest issue for us was to be able to do benchmarking for us, not only from a competition perspective, but in to be the best within our industry. And I have to tell you, Regina, that today we are on the verge of launching, perhaps in October or early November, our own affirmative action framework for historically marginalized groups. And although there isn't any political compulsion or a legislative or a compliance related issue, we are going to be doing this because it is the right thing to do for us as a corporate. So whether it is LGBT inclusion, trying to push it from a gender perspective, maternity benefits, parenthood benefits, caregiving leave, I think most of it we did it to stay ahead of the curve and to attract the best talent.
So there are more amazing comments which are pouring in. I'm going to take this moment and read out another one. There is an individual who wants to add to the conversation and say that transgenders and LGBTQ plus community has been in India for over 2000 years. So we have seen them in courts of kings and queens and have been close confidants for the queens. So why don't we use our in-depth knowledge and our rich culture to drive this in organizations? I think if you ask about my personal opinion, that's the most apt way to put this. India was a very inclusive culture. If you want to begin with, somewhere over the years we lost our way. But what are your
See,
comments?
let me be very frank. I mean, I come from the Hijra community, and I'm tired of comparing us to becoming part of the king and courts and queens and harem keepers and all that stuff. I mean, the one that it was an issue of the past, and today, if you look at us, we are dependent on sex work, on begging, on dancing for survival. Most of us, in fact, do that. And if you look at that lived realities, the most important part is that strategy. You've learned to combat extreme poverty. You've learned to combat extreme discrimination, and you've actually got nerves of steel by dealing with discrimination and assault in the society. I think what we need to do is position people in as many roles as possible. Look at what happened with the persons with disability in the RPWD Act. So between 1 and 3% reservation, how many public sector, forget the private sector, how many public sector enterprises are actually living up to their commitment of being able to hire up to 3% of persons with disability in a reserve quota base? The answer is still a long way off. So I think until it comes to an issue of compliance, until we bring transgender people into a similar kind of a reservation bracket in kind of some kind of jobs, the government and the private sector is not really going to act in consonance. Today, you find so many private sector organizations kind of looking at transgender sensitization because they realize that at some point of time they have to look at compliance, they have to set up a grievance redressal system, they have to ramp up their own internal policies and frameworks to be kind of compliant with the law, and that is the reason why they are doing it. So I would say that unless you bring in this quota and forget about the past glory, I mean, past is always beautiful, but because it is at a distance, no one knows the realities of how good or bad it was because we never lived in that time. And I don't have any memories of being in someone's harem. I would love to think of that, but maybe for another lifetime.
All right. So we're going to take a couple of more questions, and we have a few minutes left before we log out. So here is your chance to post more questions. One of the individuals wants to ask: is a top-down approach successful or a bottom-up approach successful for allyship in an organization?
In the infancy stage, you have to have a top-down approach because until your senior leadership whips your business leadership into action, nothing is going to happen. And to sustain a movement that is mid towards maturity model, it is the bottoms-up approach actually working because it is people who are your administrators, your execs, your associates, your AMs who are actually going to be the driving force behind allyship, because this is going to be that one significant 0 to 6 year age, employment bracket who will actually be the drivers of the culture of the organization. So that is the lot that you need to catch, but you will not be able to do that until your senior leadership buys it. So top down for the first 2 years and bottoms up from year 2 and above.
Sure. There is I think we have encouraged a lot of people today, and there is a lot of curiosity around building careers in D&I. So if you can help us understand what should be the starting path and what should we do to upskill ourselves to become good D&I professionals?
Okay, let me tell you one story about myself, which I did not. So I came in from the development sector. I came in from a development sector and worked with governments for most of my life. Then one day I decided that, why don't I try working in the D&I sector? And I said, I was pretty confident I could talk the right languages. And I went for a very large manufacturing organization in Mumbai, which kind of Tom that they had done a lot of work on transgender inclusion. And they said that, and they did 10 rounds of interviews. 10 rounds of interviews over 1 year, 2 psychometric tests, asked for my salary certificate kind of stuff. And it was going to be an informal chat with the chairperson on the role expectation. As I walked out of the meeting, the chairperson said that they don't have anything specifically to offer me right now and they'll get back in the future. This was for a manager kind of role for D&I. Then I was interviewed with a nationalized bank. They selected me for the position, but they asked me if I would like to reconsider if I wanted to actually join them, because they felt that I had too much of potential and ambition, and this organization would not be the right place for me to be in, and I might actually find it stifling to be there. I accepted their reasoning because they said we would be able to pay you X amount of money, which was not an issue. at all, because it was just walking distance from my house in Mumbai, and I wanted to desperately shift to Mumbai. I did not like the approach of the first organization, because in order to be a good D&I person, the first prerequisite is that you understand the real realities of people. The second thing is that if you want to start D&I as a career, you have to make some investment into learning. You have to take on extra volunteering roles, or to be an ally, or increase your stretch goals to include D&I, because unless you do this, and only then this will act as building blocks in your potential career as a DNI. I was swept into KPMG, and this was actually a senior associate director position, but considering my experience, my organization actually made it into a director position and got me on board. So they changed the panel at the last moment and said, no, from an SCD, we want to make it a D position, so that we are setting the right example and also kind of setting the right signal to people. So these are some of my humble tips that I feel that invest in a course, volunteer your time for the different D&I initiatives. Don't limit yourself to one pillar. Don't focus yourself on LGBT or PWD. Today, you need to be equally conversant on terms of multiculturalism, multi-gen, and gender. Familiarize yourselves with at least one coaching program or one mentorship program, because these are going to be, and a large part is, how are you going to turn around data in the organization? So if you're going to make an investment over the next 1 year, I would suggest use these building blocks to move ahead.
Okay.
Cyrus, I'm sorry, I did not kind of mean that in a negative way. What I actually mean to say that when people actually talk about their past glory in Mughal courts or wherever, I think this is one incident which I kind of don't relate to, because there is no glory in become. See what used to happen. Let me come up give you a little bit of history context in the term eunuch. A eunuch in a biblical sense, because it's a biblical term, it actually comes from the Bible. It was a person who was emasculated, means his genitals were cut off, so that when he goes on in high profile diplomatic assignments to other countries, the person would not be caught in a honey trap and would not give out state secrets. This is the logic that they kind of use. Similarly, if you use it in the Indian context, there were a lot of trans people who were emasculated at a very young age, so that they could become close confidants of people in power. I like the idea. It's a very romantic idea, but unfortunately, for a lot of people who are part of the Hijra community, don't see this as a big time value where they receive patronage from a particular king or a queen or anything in terms of becoming harem keepers. So that was the actual idea about saying that I love the past glory, but it looks good from a distance, not from something not from something in the present tense. I,
All
I
right.
mean, yeah, I get your point, Cyrus. Thank you so much for pointing it out, and I understand you actually mean something positive. But I was just trying to put my point of view, that this is what I think about it.
So the next question for the evening is there a systematic way KPMG is also focusing on including veteran community?
So as part of the work that we do on multiculturalism and multi-gen, a large focus of it is also going to be working with veterans. We have a veteran looking at operations. We have veterans across our pillars on IGH. We have a specific pillar which is called infrastructure, governance and health, which actually looks at government programming and also from the risk sector. We have currently 20 veterans working with us, and we actually would be formalizing our tie-up with a veteran associate, because for us, veteran is not only people who've served in the armed forces, it could also mean academic veterans or professional veterans who have passed out a particular retirement phase, but bring together a wealth of information with them and experience. As long as they are okay to work with us on a fixed economic price bracket, but they bring us their experience, we are more than happy to work. In fact, we are forming up our strategy with them right as we speak. So this is going beyond our call of duty, because generally people associate veterans with only people who have come out of the armed forces. For us, we are trying to expand our definition around understanding of veterans.
All right, fair enough. Another question coming your way, Zainab. I think as we speak, there are three more questions which add to our list. But anyhow, let me read this one out. Where do you get most of your trans applications from? That's the first part of the question. The second one says, is it usually job fairs or LGBTQ plus referrals?
Uh, I don't really believe in the concept of job fairs. One, that is expensive. The second thing, we could actually use that money for upskilling the community and actually get a good referrals to come in, because there are many community-based organizations working on that. I would actually put the money in actually seeking out active referrals and running an in-house campaigns, because one, it costs less. Yes, there is a definite value in branding and visibility around job fairs and the glitz, glamour, and show that you get to do. But I think in the long run, I would rather make an investment in running a job hiring drive. LinkedIn, Jobs for me, there are many portals who kind of run hiring drives for people who are from marginalized communities, and we need to make investments on that front. That is number one. The second thing is that I have been able to get a significant good number of people who've reached out to me on LinkedIn, because or on Facebook or on Instagram, in that sense, because for me that's been they see me as a visible person and been able to reach out to me. But I believe that also kind of determines how visible is your branding on various platforms to be able to take that from a hiring drive perspective. So in that case, you might actually have to work with multiple organizations. And see, today you don't have a dearth of organizations who specialize in hiring for the LGBT sector. There is Pride Circle, Community Business, there is Vivid. There are many many organizations offering services and referrals from a pool of people whom they are already catering to. So I would rather make an investment with them rather than to only participate in the job fair, because the job fair adds one more extra layer of interviewing, at least for people who are into management consulting and other roles which require direct interface with business and not really entry level positions. I would say that specific hiring drives and direct referrals work more for me.
All right. Also, by the way, Inclusify is working on an AI tool which supports unbiased hiring. So if anybody is curious or wants to get into a conversation with us, do reach out to us through our email ID, hello@inclusify.io, and we would be happy to interact with you. Having said that, let's take the last question for this evening. Again, thank you all for being such an interactive audience. Your interaction has made this session quite successful. So the last question is a part of the previous question, which is, can you suggest a few courses for D&I professionals if you have any course in mind?
So right now, so depending on what curve you are, I would suggest a professional course. There are many universities offering IND courses. If you are a mid-level career professional and want to take up that as a something, you might want to search that. But in India, if you're looking at starting off your career, there is a course which has just started off in FICCI, which is I think a 6-week course. There are courses of being offered by I think Interweave, if I'm not mistaken. But you might want to there is one course, very interesting course offered by the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. But again, that comes at a premium, and you have to measure out the outcome of that one in investment that you make in upskilling through this participation in the course, whether it's coming at a cost shared basis with your organization, or is it just your investment, and how are you looking at opportunities. I would suggest to go in for short to medium term courses right now, because there is generally a recruitment freeze and HR roles will be scuttled as we move forward in the future. So look at short term learning, volunteer more, try and join various IND outfits, and try and campaign for causes apart from stuff that you like to do. So if you are an LGBT activist and ally, try and also get involved in the gender continuum issue. It's not only about talking about gender and representation, but try and understand the basics of mentoring, the basis of networking, and those kind of stuff will actually help you build more than one competency area when it comes to IND.
So with that, we've come to the end of the session. Zainab, I would especially like to thank you for giving us an opportunity to interact with you today. It was an amazing session, and we got insights, and we have a lot of ideas we can build upon, and hopefully we have inspired a lot of people today. We hope that we're going to have another interactive session with you soon. Also, I'm going to repeat myself, but do follow us on Inclusify throughout our social media handles so that we can come up with more interactive sessions for you and we can bring more D&I leaders to the forefront. So with that, have a beautiful evening and until next time. Thank you.
Thank you.